After action report detailing the Virtual Pod Tournament round between DevianID and MechWarrior Lincoln. The mission and objectives of this round were the destruction of the 3 Level 2 light buildings on the opposition side. The objective buildings were comprised of 6 hexes of construction factor 60 each. Every hex destroyed was worth 5 points up to a maximum of 60 points. Note that this meant that only 2 of the 3 buildings needed to be destroyed in order to max out objective score. Additionally, note that each building requires only 4 of the 6 hexes to be destroyed before the remaining hexes collapse, per page 167 of Total Warfare. This means that the maximum objective score could be achieved with the demolition of only 8 building hexes. Combat points were also awarded based on a percentage of enemy battle value lost, 1 point for every 2.25% BV, up to a maximum of 40 points. The map itself was a 43 by 24 symmetrical layout, and heavily featured woods, roads, and snow. The river down the center of the map was entirely depth 0 water, and would not factor into the match. The greatest consideration was that between the elevation changes, woods, and size of the map, damaging any of the objective buildings would require either a long-ranged unit to get to an elevated position, or a unit to get close to the objective. These same considerations meant that to defend an objective from attack, a unit would need to stay near said objective, as the height to objective buildings would make it easy for an assaulting unit to break line of sight with long-ranged fire. A defender would need to be both mobile enough to shift around an objective building and dangerous enough to meaningfully threaten an approaching mech. Lincoln's force consisted of 2 centerpiece generalist loadouts, the Triskelion and the Vulture Mark IV. Both featured long-range capability, one with twin Artemis V LRM-15s and one with twin ATM-12s, as well as expanded capacity at short range via lasers and high-X ammunition. And between a dedicated pilot on the Triskelion and ferro-lamellar armor on the Vulture, both were able to soak damage and avoid failed PSRs. The Crusader was intended to perform building demolition with its quad MML-3s and re-engineered medium lasers, as well as utilizing its tonnage to collapse additional hexes quickly so it could re-engage the enemy and contribute to the fight. The Black Hawk was tasked with defense, as its short-range loadout was determined to be better suited to combating mechs than rapid demolition. The Celerity Superlight Quad was intended to act as a flexible reaction force to whatever threat exposed itself, either as a tagger for long-range semi-guided fire from the Triskelion, deployment of its carried Wraith battle armor, or as a charging threat which could reliably deal north of 20 points of damage to a target. DevianID's force was a Jade Falcon clan list consisting of 4 mechs and 2 points of battle armor. The centerpiece of DevianID's force was the Jade Phoenix, and with twin ATM-12s, SRM-6s, and clan ER medium lasers, it presented the greatest threat to any mech it closed with. A 4.65 movement profile ensures a high level of mobility for brawling, and Talon feet only added to its close-in capabilities. The anti-tank Iron Souled assault battle armor were also a significant danger to any unit that approached them, as a Gunnery 2 assault battle armor with twin LBX autocannons can reliably land up to 40 hits clustering in damage values of 1. They also have 16 points of fire-resistant armor, which makes them incredibly difficult to remove. Their lack of mobility, however, consigned them to protecting only one of the 3 objectives, obligating the use of the remaining buildings to score. The remainder of DevianID's forces included the Pouncer, a melee-focused mech carrying a point of simian battle armor to capitalize on its need to get close to the enemy, and a pair of medium mechs with enough firepower to be effective skirmishers, but not enough armor to stand their ground against a larger mech. Lincoln deployed from the northeast, while DevianID was set to deploy from the southwest. The Triskelion and Vulture were paired up with the aim of getting early damage in at range on the south objective building by using their LRMs and ATMs. The Crusader and Blackhawk were set at the top of the map, the Crusader to be sent in solo to deal with one of the objective buildings, while the Blackhawk ran interference. Given their short-range loadouts, they were placed to be able to stay out of line of sight with most of the enemy field on turn 1. The Celerity was placed in such a fashion as to maximize TMM modifiers on its first movement, as the intention was to have it in the center of the board turn 1 so it could move to any other point of the board afterwards, while similarly being protected from enemy fire. As expected, the Ironhold battle armor was deployed on one of the objectives, effectively locking down the southwest objective and making it risky to attack. The Pouncer and Jade Phoenix were set to face the Crusader and Blackhawk, a fight Lincoln's mechs were unlikely to win, but they stood a good chance of destroying an objective and tying up DevianID's forces for long enough to keep them out of the southern fight. The Battle Cobra and Hierofalcon were deployed to the south, facing the Triskelion and Vulture. Round 1 saw mostly objective damage done. The Crusader and Blackhawk exploited their planned line-of-sight blocking, while the Triskelion and Vulture were also able to move to their planned positions. Due to the positioning of the Battle Cobra and the Hierofalcon, however, the Vulture was used to put some shots into the Hierofalcon instead of joining in the Triskelion on attacking the southern objective. Round 2 started out with a critical error, as Lincoln's Crusaders skidded off the map after a long bomb mask-enhanced run that ended with a failed 6-up PSR on concrete. At this point, roles had to be reassigned, and defense of the northern objective was removed as a priority. The Blackhawk shifted to take the Crusaders' place approaching the northwestern objective. DevianID took advantage of an exposed rear armor with the Pouncer and moved in for backshots on the Blackhawk, while the Celerity attempted to charge at the Pouncer's exposed rear itself in the hopes of potentially doing significant damage. DevianID sent the Hierofalcon forward towards the northeast objective, utilizing the Battle Cobra to provide fire support against the Triskelion. The Triskelion returned the favor while the Vulture took shots at the exposed rear of the Hierofalcon before it could get to cover, triggering a PSR from damage done. The Blackhawk was hit by 2 of the Pouncer's battery of heavy small lasers and avoided the subsequent lance attack. The charge against the Pouncer failed on a 9-up and caused the Celerity to be displaced onto the top of the level 2 hill beside it, which would mandate a notable expenditure of MP in the following movement phase to get it down. Having done some damage to the Blackhawk with the Pouncer in the previous round, DevianID shifted it to building demolition, as between the heavy small lasers and a plasma cannon, the mech is extremely qualified for the task, able to deal upwards of 86 damage per round to buildings. It drops off its battle armor for additional damage in the following turns. He also moves the Hierofalcon to deal with the northeast objective and pulls the Battle Cobra back to stay in cover from the pursuing Triskelion. The Jade Phoenix moves up to deal some damage to the northern objective, and Lincoln takes advantage of this move in order to put some rear shots into the rear of the Jade Phoenix while he moves his Blackhawk closer to the northeast objective. The Vulture is moved to try and get a bead on the Hierofalcon, as it is determined to be unlikely that there will be another opportunity to destroy the Hierofalcon before the northeast objective is destroyed. Meanwhile, the Celerity moves to drop off the Wraith battle armor at the northwest objective, as the MP expenditure to get the Celerity off the cliff was too high to be worth risking the fragile mech on a charge, and the Blackhawk will likely need the assistance with demolition. At this point in time, Lincoln concedes the northeast objective to destruction. The Battle Cobra continues to retreat from the Triskelion, potentially trying to draw it towards the Ironhold battle armor who have been advancing towards the southern objective for the past several turns. Meanwhile, the Celerity attempts to charge the Pouncer in order to try and get some damage in. It is unable to get a rear armor charge due to positioning, but will still deal 26 damage on a 6-up, as well as additional damage if it successfully pushes the mech into the building. There is nothing left available that will reach the Pouncer in time to prevent it from destroying the northern objective, and the Celerity is unlikely to survive the charge attempt and subsequent retaliatory melee, but the aim is to slow down the Pouncer, and if fortunate, cripple or kill it and remove it as a consideration. In the north, the Jade Phoenix turns to pursue the Blackhawk, which is now committed to destroying the northwest objective. It fails to hit the Blackhawk this turn, but has enough speed and maneuverability to be on the Blackhawk almost immediately. In the south, the Triskelion does enough damage to force a PSR and a fall on the Battle Cobra, with minimal damage in return. In the melee phase, the charge is successful, but it costs the Celerity and fails to do more than armor damage to the Pouncer, which was the most likely outcome. At this point, Lincoln determines that he cannot defend his objectives and score objective points of his own, and as such, no further moves to defend the 2 objectives currently under siege will be made this game. The next round, the Battle Cobra slips away from the Triskelion and hides in woods, breaking line of sight with the Triskelion's original position. The Triskelion makes an attempt to get shots on it but cannot find any with good hit chances. Meanwhile, the Blackhawk makes use of its tonnage, knocking down 2 building hexes in the movement phase, taking 30 damage as it does so from the falls. It will be prone for this turn, but the Jade Phoenix cannot get close enough to kick it, and the only spot it can get shots on it put it in jump range of the Wraith battle armor. The Jade Phoenix does move in, and the Wraith move to leg attack on a 7-up. This leg attack fails, but the Jade Phoenix misses its SRMs on 8-ups. However, the high explosive ATM rounds find their mark, heavily damaging the Blackhawk and stripping off tons of armor. The Triskelion switches targets to the Ironhold battle armor holed up in a building. By targeting the building the battle armor are in, the Triskelion has a 5-up to hit, and because this is a light building, the battle armor within takes 75% of the damage done to the building. The Blackhawk stands and moves into the building hex adjacent to it in round 6 to gain some cover from the Jade Phoenix, who jumps next to it in order to ensure kicks in the melee phase. The Wraith battle armor follow to try once more to leg attack. Meanwhile, the Battle Cobra moves towards the southeast objective, but comes into contact with the Vulture. Though it does some damage to the Vulture, it is ultimately destroyed by ATM fire. The Triskelion deals more damage to the Ironhold battle armor by shooting at the building they are in, killing 2 of the troopers, while the Wraith battle armor managed to crit a foot actuator on the Jade Phoenix. Jumping is now dangerous for that mech. The Jade Phoenix, meanwhile, fails to damage the Blackhawk despite hitting with one of its ATMs, as mechs inside of a building the same height or higher than them gain partial cover, as well as damage reduction equal to a percentage of the building's CF, which proves sufficient to negate the damage clusters of the ATMs. However, the building does deal some damage to the mech when it collapses, and the Jade Phoenix kicks both the leg and the torso of the Blackhawk off, causing it to fall automatically and sealing its fate in the following turn. An initiative loss in turn 7 causes Lincoln to shift to focusing on the final building hex of the northwest building. With only 18 construction factor remaining and the Blackhawk unable to deal damage to it, the Wraith battle armor are now responsible for its destruction. As they can only deal 16 damage to the building, they jump on top of it to take advantage of their own weight, which will cause the building to collapse after shooting is resolved. The Vulture is sent after the southern objective, as it will be able to destroy hexes faster than the Triskelion, which is sent up to try and intercept the Hierofalcon for combat score. The Jade Phoenix kills the Wraith battle armor with missile fire, and then kicks the Blackhawk with its 26 damage kick, finishing off both units. Despite this, the Wraith battle armor successfully dropped the final building hex in the northwest objective. Turn 8 marks the end of the significant conflict. Over the next several turns, the Hierofalcon and Pouncer finish off their respective buildings and begin to make their way down towards the remaining 2 mechs of Lincoln's force. The Jade Phoenix moves towards them as well, but the foot crit has slowed it down significantly, and with the lead in combat score DevianID has established, there is no need to rush into conflict and potentially spoil that. The Jade Phoenix will contribute little from round 8 onwards bar some long-range fire. By round 10, the Hierofalcon has engaged the southeast objective, with the Triskelion trying to hunt it down. They spend the rest of the match trading blows, with the Hierofalcon hiding in the buildings and sending shots back. As a result, the Triskelion deals very little damage to the Hierofalcon despite a significant number of hits. Both end the game intact. By round 11, the Vulture has wiped out the southern objective and is sparring with the Pouncer, trying desperately to finish it off before the Simian battle armor arrive. The heat of the plasma cannon and the higher TMM of the Pouncer keep the Vulture from being able to land a knockout blow. And though the ferrolamellar armor reduces the damage of the heavy small lasers from 6 to 4, they're still dealing consistent damage. The Simian battle armor never manages to get close enough to perform anti-mech attacks, but they do get close enough to add to the heat issues, and as a result the Vulture ends the game on the ground missing a leg, while the Pouncer stays up and intact. Total score at the end resulted in 90 points for DevianID, 60 from objectives and 30 from combat. Total score at the end resulted in 75 points for MechWarrior Lincoln, 60 from objectives and 15 from combat. The early skid was an easily avoidable situation. Evaluating skid distance before executing a turn on pavement is important, especially when close to the edge of a map. Fall from a skid is recoverable, but skidding off the map is fatal. Despite this, The shift to using the Blackhawk and the Wraith battle armor was a good pivot to adapt to the circumstance. Between them, the two units could still manage to perform the same task the Crusader was intended for, and in the unlikely possibility they were not engaged, the Blackhawk could carry the Wraith battle armor back to the fight. The celerity sacrificed to the Pouncer was of questionable worth. The decision was made due to the fact that Lincoln had already written off the northeast objective as loss. However, instead of trading the celerity for an immediate long odds play with crit seeking, taking a moment to evaluate all enemy units and their damage levels would have resulted in a more prudent course of action. The Hierofalcon was damaged already from earlier ATM fire, and with its 4-5 pilot, it was less likely to be able to retaliate to a charging celerity than the 3-2 Pouncer. Both DevianID and Lincoln used buildings to great effect to tank incoming fire, with buildings mitigating 26 points of damage for the Blackhawk in round 6 and 143 points of damage for the Hierofalcon over the course of rounds 11 to 15. There are two proposed solutions to counter this tactic in the future. The first is to close to point-blank range, like the Jade Phoenix did against the Blackhawk. This does not reduce the effectiveness of the cover, but it does ensure that any misses against the unit inside the building will automatically hit and damage the building itself. However, if this is not an option due to lack of durability, then attacking a building itself from range is a workable solution. The -4 from targeting the immobile building makes fire at the long-range bracket practical, and all damage from a building collapse hits mechs on the punch table in 5-point clusters, essentially seeking out head hits instead of raw damage. Neither of these solutions truly mitigate the benefit a unit gains from taking cover inside a building, but they do ensure a minimal number of turns where the building is providing useful cover, as we can see with the clash between the Jade Phoenix and the Blackhawk. DevianID made excellent use of his unit's superior mobility to outfight the Triskelion and Vulture in the final rounds while he sought to improve his combat score. This was a risk, as losing either unit would have brought Lincoln in striking distance of winning, and losing both would have put victory to Lincoln. However, making good use of heat weapons, trees, and buildings, he was able to mitigate a significant amount of firepower, and secure 10 more points for himself in combat to the 3 that Lincoln scored from that final engagement.